In this video, I will show you how I made this guitar neck support. Since I don't have a blank big enough for this project, I'm going to make one from soft pine. I cut the pieces to length on the miter saw and then trim them to final width on the table saw. Before gluing the pieces together, I drill 2 holes on each piece at exactly the same location. I use the drill press for this. I apply the glue and then start to stack the pieces together. I slide 2 dowels into the holes and then clamp the whole thing together. The dowels are not necessary, but I prefer to have them because they help reduce the movement of the pieces while clamping. They also have a small decorative effect. I cut off the ends of the dowels and move to the oscillating spindle sander. Here I spend quite a few minutes sanding the sides and faces in order to have a uniform piece of blank. Once the blank is ready, I draw a center line and extend it on one of the sides. This will be the center of the cove cut. I make a pencil line 5/8 of an inch above this center line. This will be the depth of the cove cut. To properly set up the cove cut on the table saw, I need to first find the exact center of the blade. I then mark it with a pencil line. The cove cut that I need to make requires a cut angle of 64 degrees. I set the miter gauge at the maximum, which is about 62 degrees in this case. I place a piece of wood against the miter gauge, align the center of my blank with the center of the blade, and firmly clamp the fence into place. I make sure that the blank has a clear path. A cove cut on the table saw means that the piece of wood travels diagonally across the blade. That's what gives it the curved shape. A table saw is not designed for this type of cut, so with each pass I make very shallow cuts. I raise the blade by only a few millimeters at a time and move slowly. This reduces the stress on the blade. This is what the final cove cut looks like. I draw 2 half circles on one of the faces. Although I could use a rasp to remove the wood from the smaller circle, I prefer to make a cove cut on the table saw once again. As I raise the blade, you can see what the piece of wood will encounter as it moves diagonally across the blade. The dimensions of this cove cut are not the same as the first one, so a different setup was needed. There are a couple of ways to set up a cove cut on the table saw. The method that I prefer is to use a cove cut calculator to find the miter gauge angle. There are a few online calculators and I will list them in the description section of this video. The Cove calculator basically requires you to know the width and depth of the desired cove cut. Then the calculator will give you the angle at which the wood needs to be moved with respect to the blade. I place the wood in a clamp and use a handsaw to remove the excess wood on the outside of the larger half circle. I use a small block as a reference to start the cut. This is where I wish I had a bandsaw, not because of the work of sawing, but because the bandsaw would allow me to cut very close to the line and reduce later work. I repeat the same cut on the other side. I removed the excess on the oscillating sander. The sandpaper was old and was not removing much material. I changed the paper and worked my way to the final shape. I put on the spindle sander and sanded the inner coves. In order to sand the faces, I used a 150 grit sandpaper on a flat piece of MDF. With the cork cut to size, I apply the glue to the inner coves. I used a shipping tube wrapped in an old t-shirt to apply pressure to the cork. I then cut off the excess material with a sharp utility knife. I used sandpaper on MDF to sand the cork flush with the wood. Since the cork is soft, it only took a few passes. I used a chisel to remove the dry glue and then sanded everything flush. And here's the finished product. I put on 2 thin coats of tung oil. I'm really happy with how it turned out. The only thing left to do is to try it out. If you liked this video, then please let me know. Also consider subscribing to this channel.